Relax your body, but keep your mind sharper than ever. We have already walked through podcast episodes about the shell of debt, consumption, and even loneliness. But in today's episode, we will touch the most powerful button the global elite use to steer the behavior of billions of people without a single gun pressed to anyone's throat. That button is fear. In the world of awakening, fear is not a negative emotion that needs to be soothed. Fear is an operating system. It is software pre-installed into the most primitive part of the human brain, ensuring that when the herder presses the button, the flock runs in the exact direction already set for them. Welcome to an autopsy of the script of ghosts, where we will peel back how oligarchs stage crises to turn your freedom into a sacrificial offering on the altar of control. Welcome to Inner Shadow, where there are truths society does not want you to know. The remote control of the reptilian brain. Let's begin with a brutal biological truth. Fear will always be the enemy of reason. When you are afraid, your body drops into fight or flight. In that moment, blood is pulled away from the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for logic, analysis, and critical thinking, and redirected toward the muscles and the amygdala. In other words, when fear takes over, you become temporarily stupid in a biological sense. You lose the ability to question, the ability to see absurd scripts. You are left with only one instinct: to seek safety. Oligarchs, Western finance, and the architects of society within international organizations understand this better than anyone. They know that persuading a free person to give up privacy, give up assets, or give up control of their own life is impossible under normal conditions. But in a crisis at the peak of panic, people will voluntarily kneel down and beg to be protected, no matter the price. Fear is the lubricant for the gears of social change. Without it, the machine jams under the resistance of reason. The Hegel formula, the three-act script of manipulation. To control the crowd, the oligarch class uses a thought technique known as the Hegelian dialectic, also referred to in underground research as the formula problem, reaction, solution. This is the standard script behind every major crisis in modern history, from Wall Street to London. Act 1. Create the problem. The elite will stage or exploit a shocking event. It could be a financial collapse, a biological threat, or an invisible enemy in cyberspace. The key is that the problem must look random and beyond anyone's control. Act 2. Trigger the reaction. Through the giant media conglomerates they own, fear is amplified 1,000-fold. They paint apocalyptic scenarios, mass deaths, and the collapse of civilization itself. The goal is to push the crowd into panic and make them scream, "Do something, anything, we can't take this anymore." Act 3. Provide the solution. This is the real objective. Once the crowd is fully ripened in fear, the elite unveil the solution they prepared years in advance. And that solution always comes with expanding state power, increasing central bank control, and stripping away another portion of personal freedom. Look at the USA Patriot Act after the events of 2001. If, before that, the U.S. government had proposed wiretapping phone calls and controlling every citizen's email, people would obviously have resisted. Yet after the problem struck and panic reached its peak, the public applauded as a solution that removed privacy was enacted. That is how the script operates. Invisible ghosts. Why must the enemy be faceless? In the past, your enemy was another country, an army you could see. But in modern crisis scripts, oligarchs prefer invisible enemies, because you cannot defeat an invisible enemy, and you cannot know when that war will end. This allows the state of emergency to extend indefinitely. The ghost of terrorism. An enemy hiding in the shadows, potentially anywhere, allows global surveillance forever. The ghost of a virus. A microscopic biological entity allows control of bodies and movement to become a new normal. The ghost of climate change. A global catastrophe lasting centuries allows new taxes and control of consumption behavior in the name of saving the planet. The ghost of cyber attacks. A threat to financial systems and power grids allows the elimination of cash, and can force people into using central bank digital currency, CBDC, for easier control. These ghosts are perfect tools for keeping fear low-grade but constant. When a person lives in ongoing anxiety, they never have enough energy to be sovereign. They will always look up to experts and planners to be told how to live. The media, the machine that amplifies the frequency of fear. Fear cannot exist if it is not broadcast. Western media oligarchs have turned news into a form of psychological warfare. Observe how a news segment is staged. Dramatic music, blazing red headlines, statistics presented without context to shock as much as possible. They use continuous pumping. When the same fearful message is repeated across every TV channel, every newspaper, and every social feed, the human brain accepts it as the only reality, no matter how irrational it is. More than that, the media deploy hired experts, people with scientific or economic credentials, to legitimize the owner's script. When you see a person in a white lab coat or a professor from a prestigious university funded by oligarchic foundations saying we are in danger, your instinct to submit to authority is activated. They do not report so you understand. They report so you feel. And the only feeling they want you to have is helplessness. A helpless crowd is a very easy crowd to lead. The spoils of fear. The great asset harvest. Never let a crisis go to waste. That is Wall Street's oligarch mantra. Every time a fear script is triggered, a massive wealth transfer inevitably follows. Look at global financial crises. When fear blankets markets, panicked retail investors dump every asset, real estate, stocks, even gold, at bargain prices. Then the insiders, the big banks with unlimited money printed by central banks, step in and buy everything. They call it a market correction. I call it a harvest. Fear wipes out the poor and the middle class, while the rich grow richer on the crowd's panic. And there is something even more horrifying. Fear is the excuse to print money. Every crisis demands trillion-dollar bailouts. That money does not go into everyone's pockets. It flows into the banking system to preserve the dominance of debt. You receive a few small relief checks, but you pay the price later through inflation and soaring tax burdens. The oligarchs have turned your fear into their profit legally and exquisitely. The erosion of self-determination under permanent emergency. The ultimate goal of crisis scripts is always the establishment of a perpetual state of emergency. In the laws of most Western countries, an emergency allows governments to temporarily suspend basic freedoms. The danger is this: once freedom is removed in a crisis, it is rarely fully restored when the crisis passes. We are gradually becoming accustomed to being tracked in our movements, having our financial transactions controlled, having speech restricted under the banner of fighting misinformation, being forced to comply with harsh medical or environmental regulations. Fear makes you accept these as temporary measures for the common good. But the oligarchs see them as new milestones of control. They are building a digital cage, and every crisis adds another bar. By the time you realize you are in prison, fear has made you forget what real freedom feels like. The polarization script, using fear to divide and rule. Fear does not target only invisible enemies. It also targets your neighbor. The elite can use crisis scripts to split the crowd into two camps: the compliant and the resistant. They label those who ask questions as dangerous, selfish, or anti-science. They incite fearful people to attack those who try to defend freedom. When people fear one another, they will never unite against the herder. The crowd's outrage is redirected away from the elite and toward their own brothers and sisters. This is the pinnacle of power autopsy. You do not need to guard prisoners if you can make prisoners guard one another with fear and hatred. Fear turns empathy into suspicion. It turns community into a collection of isolated individuals, always viewing one another through a lens of threat. And in that isolation, the system's voice becomes the only anchor. Finale. Awakening inside a manufactured nightmare. Welcome, you have now seen the gears of the fear machine. How does it feel to realize that global tragedies are sometimes nothing more than scripts on paper inside boardrooms? The truth is that the control system depends on your consent through fear. If you no longer fear, they no longer have power. You cannot stop the elite from staging the next crisis. A new problem will certainly appear. The media will scream again, and another freedom-stripping solution will be proposed. But you can choose to stop reacting according to their script. The solution is not to escape reality. It is to build an inner fortress. Below are 3 rules to dissect fear in your own life. Rule 1. Practice emotional distance from the news. Whenever a new crisis erupts, remember the formula: problem, reaction, solution. Do not let yourself be swept away by the first emotional wave. Turn off the TV, leave social media, and wait. When the crowd is panicking, that is when you must be coldest. Ask, who benefits from this? Which of my freedoms is about to be targeted? Healthy skepticism is armor against media hypnosis. Rule 2. Build self-reliance and resilience. Fear only works if you are completely dependent on the system. If you are financially sovereign, no debt, real assets, health sovereign, a healthy lifestyle, and knowledge sovereign, you will fear volatility far less. Make yourself an entity that is hard to harm through emergency decrees. A person who can survive independently is a person the system cannot blackmail with fear. Rule 3. Connect through truth, not through fear. Seek out and build a community of people who have awakened together. The oligarchs want you alone in fear. Resist by uniting in clarity. When we exchange real information, support one another with resources, and jointly identify manipulation scripts, the fear matrix loses its effect. Courage is a frequency, and it can spread more powerfully than fear. Fear is an illusion projected into a wall of the mind by those who want to own your life. When you are brave enough to turn around and look at the projector, you will see it is only a mess of old wires made of greed and thirst for power. Never let fear define you. Let clarity lead the way. The trap is still there, but now you know how to walk straight through it without touching the serrated teeth.